we're going to look at these verses again and try to peel back these layers a little bit more, and I think we'll find some surprising things here. John 4:46, Yeshua came therefore again to Cana of Galilee, where he made the water into wine. There was a certain nobleman whose son was sick at Capernaum. So I thought I'd put this map up so you could kind of get an idea of what was going on. You can see we have Cana marked, and we have Capernaum marked. So Cana is where they were all at, but the nobleman had a sick son who was at Capernaum. So this looks to be roughly 20 miles or so distant as the crow flies. And 20 miles isn't all that much for us today, but it's a fairly good walk back in those days. Well, let's continue on a little bit. It mentions there a certain nobleman whose son was sick at Capernaum. And the word nobleman comes from a Greek word that essentially means the king's man. So someone who is an official who serves the king. And this particular official is believed to be in the service of Herod Antipas and believed to be Cusa, Herod's steward. And we might remember when we went through Luke, there were a number of women that traveled with Yeshua and the disciples looking after their needs, providing out of their own goods in order to provide food to Yeshua and those with him. And one of those people apparently was Cusa's wife. And this very likely is Cusa. And this is probably telling us how he came to faith in Yeshua. So it's very interesting. Now, do we know all that for sure? No, but it seems to fit. It seems to fit. And this is about controversial healings. Why would this be controversial? It's very simple. Most of the people that Yeshua was ministering to hated Herod and anybody that had anything to do with Herod. And probably for good reason, because the Herod clan were Edomites, and they were known to be pretty slimy people. I mean, they committed murders even within their own family and were abusive towards those under them and so on. So they were really hated, and yet Yeshua received this person. Let's read more about what happened. There was a certain nobleman whose son was sick at Capernaum. When he heard that Yeshua had come out of Judea into Galilee, he went to him and begged him that he would come down and heal his son, for he was at the point of death. So he was asking Yeshua to come from there in Cana to Capernaum in order to heal his son. And the fact that they were in Cana when this man came, no doubt the word had gotten to him about this miracle that Yeshua had done. And so he was thinking, perhaps this man that did this miracle could then save my son. So Yeshua said, unless you see signs and wonders, you will in no way believe. So that seems to be a reference to how that man came to Yeshua. He heard about Yeshua because of the sign that Yeshua had done, and that's why he was coming. Now we have this question that comes up here. This does indeed come across sounding like a negative thing, but as Fred brought out, signs in the scriptures aren't a wholly negative thing. It becomes a little bit more complicated, and so we're going to go into this a little bit more. As Fred brought out, there are signs that are a part of Yahweh's word. And it starts in the very first chapter of the book. Genesis chapter 1 It tells us about Elohim putting the lights or the stars and heavenly bodies into the sky, and it says he did it for signs. So clearly, Yahweh himself is providing signs. And then it goes on. I have here a verse from him speaking with Moses where Yahweh says, "You shall take this rod in your hand with which you shall do the signs." And that would be the signs that Fred had referred to. So Yahweh himself was giving Moses certain signs to perform so that people would know that Moses actually did come from Yahweh. And Isaiah 7:14, we have a prophetic verse. "Therefore Adonai himself will give you a sign. Behold, the virgin will conceive and bear a son, and shall call his name Emmanuel." So one sign of the Messiah is that he would be born of a virgin. I think you're not going to mistake this one. You know, there's just one person of whom that is true. And of course, that is Yeshua Messiah, called Emmanuel, which is simply saying, "With us is God." A very powerful sign indeed. Ezekiel 20:12 has an interesting sign. It says, "Moreover also I gave them my Sabbaths to be a sign between me and them, that they might know that I am Yahweh who sanctifies or sets them apart." Who are the true followers of Yeshua? Who are the true Israel? How are you going to know that? Well, there's a sign, and that is they keep Yahweh's Sabbath, not their own. So that sign is very useful, isn't it? To help us determine something we need to determine here in these last days. And then my last example, Matthew 24:3. The disciples were speaking to Yeshua saying, "Tell us, when will these things be? What is the sign of your coming and of the end of the age?" They wanted a sign to know when the things would happen that Yeshua told him about. And he gives them the sign there in Matthew 24. We have studied that sign. And why did he give it to them? So that when it happened, they would know and believe that his word was coming true, and they would know that that was the time. So very, very important to have that sign. In all of these cases, Yahweh had good reasons for giving a sign. And in all of these cases, there's certainly nothing wrong with looking for that sign. In fact, it's given because we need to look at it. For example, today, we have some very strange goings on in the world we live in. But is it the end of the age? Well, if we look at the sign and compare it to the things we see around us, we can make a determination. And I think you would have to pretty much be pretty dyed in the wool as an unbeliever not to see these signs in evidence. And that's important because the end of the age calls for some unique things for followers of Yeshua. So these are looking at signs on the positive side, and definitely signs that come from Yahweh, and signs that in no way make a person an unbeliever because they believe in those signs or follow those signs. However, there is a negative side to signs, and we need to also be aware of that. So we're going to look at the problem with signs. The fair definition of a sign is that by which a person or a thing is distinguished from others and is known. And then in part B, an unusual occurrence transcending the common course of nature. So something is considered a sign if it is unusual and not something you normally see. But because something is unusual and not something you normally see, does that necessarily mean that it's from Yahweh? And then we have the Greek term that wonder is translated from, and Thayer's definition is a miracle performed by anyone. So here's the problem with signs. Signs and wonders aren't necessarily from Yahweh. As this says here, it can be performed by anyone. So if what people are looking for is signs to hang their hat on instead of the truth, like all the signs that I showed you that Yahweh gave us, they were to be considered in the context of his whole truth. But if people are driven to signs and wonders to satisfy their curiosity, to satisfy their own desire to follow someone, then it can be a problem because they can be deceived. To those who need signs and wonders, whomever has the best trick wins. And you know what? Sometimes the enemy seems to have the best trick. Nowadays, especially. You know something about the technology today, right? That they can literally do what they call deep fake videos. They can create a video of you doing and saying something that looks just like you, only it isn't you. And they're getting that technology to the point where you can do that like on your laptop or cell phone. And this is only one of many, many kind of deceptions that can be done. So signs are a special problem, I think, in an era with the kind of technology that we have today. Now, here's more about this. To chase after signs can be because of a lack of faith. What should motivate us? How should we decide who's from Yahweh and who isn't? Should it be who can do the most impressive signs? Or should it be the truth from his word? So, you know, some people, they want a shortcut. They don't want to do the work that's needed to know his word. So instead, they just want to have some kind of a sign that they can follow. And this is a problem because if this is what we do, it's kind of like telling Yahweh that we doubt him, that his word is not enough, and we require something more that he hasn't offered. 2 Thessalonians 2, 7 through 12 is really a chilling passage because it tells us not only about something that can happen, it tells us about something that will happen here in the end of the age, and it has to do with signs and wonders. It says, the Toraless one, that is the man of lawlessness, or the person sometimes referred to as the Antichrist, will be revealed. Even he whose coming is according to the working of Satan, with all power and signs and lying wonders, and with all deception of wickedness for those who are being lost. Stop there a minute. Is this real? Can Satan really produce such power and signs and lying wonders? He can do that all day long. Very impressive. Very impressive. If you are a person who's given to chasing after signs, is he likely to get you? See, this is the problem with signs, isn't it? And why would Yahweh let that happen? Why would he let this evil person come along with all of these evil signs from Satan to deceive people? Well, this goes on and tells us that. Because they didn't receive the love of the truth that they might be saved. So you see, what's happening here is Yahweh has given us a choice. We have his truth, and then we have the deceptions of Satan. And this tests our hearts. Do we love his truth? Or do we love his lying signs and wonders? Because, you know, his lying signs and wonders all appeal to your natural man. That's the facts. And the truth sometimes is difficult for us. And we all know we don't fully measure up to the truth at all times. And so sometimes it would feel easier just to follow after those signs, follow after that guy that seems to have it together, that's able to do these wonders. It goes on, Elohim sends them a working of error that they should believe a lie, that they all might be judged who didn't believe the truth, but had pleasure in unrighteousness. We have to understand what the end of the age is about. It's really about separating the whole human race, isn't it? It's about dividing up the whole human race into those who the scriptures refer to as the wheat and the chaff, or the sheep and the goats. Who's going to go on into the kingdom with Yeshua, and who just doesn't belong there? And the method that Yahweh is going to allow to happen is for Satan to do his worst. Right at the very end, to raise up the worst representative he's ever had, or the best, depending which side you're on. The most powerful signs and wonders, not to mention the wonders of the scientific age. Things are going to be rolled out, I'm telling you, between now and this soon coming event that will astound us. And we think we have great technology right now, but you wait and see what's going to happen. And all that is being brought to bear. Yahweh is allowing all that to be brought to bear. And the end result is, will people be running after the wonders and the signs to satisfy their own flesh? Or will they be standing fast for the love of the truth? So, as you can see, we must be very careful about signs and wonders and judging things on the basis of signs and wonders. The nobleman begged him that he would come down and heal his son, for he was at the point of death. Well, if your son is at the point of death, you're going to do whatever you can do to try and save him. That's what most people would do. So it's not a surprise that at this moment he hears that Yeshua has come back to Cana. He knows about what Yeshua did before. He has this urgent need for his son. So that's bringing him to Yeshua. And this is a good thing for both him and his son, that he went to Yeshua. But I have to tell you, he just as easily could have gone to some wonder-working guy that wasn't Yeshua, right? Because it's all about the need that he had in the moment. But he did go to Yeshua. And Yeshua did not turn him away. Now, it doesn't go into this here, but I'm thinking when he came to Yeshua, and he's, in the minds of some people, a traitor. They would see him that way, being a servant of Herod. a collaborator with the enemy. And Yeshua just receives him just like everybody else. Some people would be offended by that, but Yeshua never was concerned whether people were offended with him, because he was open to every person that came to him. Every person, no matter who they were, rich or poor, of high station, low station, if they came to him, he always received them. And it also tells us here that this is in Cana. And so, once again, we realize this is probably the reason why the nobleman came to Yeshua seeking these miracles. And as I mentioned, if anyone else was doing miracles, he probably would have gone to them. And that's how it is with people that seek signs and wonders. They have a problem, and they want it solved, and they don't care how that happens. Well, let's go on. The nobleman said to him, "Sir, come down before my child dies." He's feeling very urgent. And Yeshua said to him, "Go your way, your son lives." Just a word. Yeshua didn't have to do any mumbo jumbo. No big show. No big show. Very disappointing, isn't it? Don't you like the show? To have the big show? The music, the yelling, the casting out of the demons, the big show? Yeshua needed no big show. He simply said it. Go your way, your son lives. And it says the man believed the word that Yeshua spoke to him, and he went his way. Well, that's a very good thing. That's a very good thing in favor of this man. And we see the outcome of what happened. At the very time Yeshua said it, the son was healed. And this caused the entire house to believe in Yeshua. So this is a good outcome from this sign, which was a genuine, real sign of Yeshua. Not a big show, just a genuine, real sign of Yeshua doing what the scripture said he would do, heal the people of Israel, and he just did it with a word. And they believed, and they should believe. So that's what happened. Now we go into John chapter 5, and what I've said here in my notes is that the narrative now skips ahead 4 months to the second Passover of Yeshua's ministry, showing us Yeshua once again in Jerusalem. Now, we just have the one event in Cana, and Yeshua was in that whole area for 4 more months. Why doesn't it just tell us everything that happened, or even some more things that happened while he's there in the Galilee region? Instead, he just came from Jerusalem. We have this one thing that happens after the incident on his trip with the Samaritans, this one thing that happens in Galilee. And then the narrative zips back to Jerusalem again, and it takes up from there. The reason is because the narrative is continuing this theme about signs and wonders and unbelief. And this statement of Yeshua is really the theme of this entire section. Unless you see signs and wonders, you will in no way believe. So that's really why we're going to this next incident having to do with this healing. This healing involves signs and wonders that are kind of a contrast to the sign that we just saw here with the nobleman. It begins, "Now in Jerusalem by the sheep gate there is a pool, which is called in Hebrew Bethesda, having 5 porches. In these lay a great multitude of those who were sick, blind, lame, or paralyzed." Bethesda means house of mercy or flowing water. Those seem kind of different to me. So it could mean either one of those things. The Bethesda pool has been discovered by archaeologists. That red circle you see on the map is approximately where they found the Bethesda pool. That other large shape that's outlined in red, that's the Temple Mount. And so you can see that that Bethesda pool is just north of the Temple Mount, quite close to it. And it's in the modern day Muslim section of the old city of Jerusalem. The word that is used there in John for the pool of Bethesda, the word for pool, means a place for diving, a swimming hole, a reservoir, or pool for bathing. So this does not sound like something that has significance, religious significance to the Jews. This sounds like just a more common kind of pool from the standpoint of the writer. What you're seeing here in the picture is what they've uncovered, that Bethesda pool. And as you can see, it's quite massive in size. It's about 131 yards on each side. It has a width of about 55 yards. And the pools are about 49 feet deep. So this is not a little wading pool. This is really quite a significant kind of pool. We have more. This is a scale model of Jerusalem from modern day Jerusalem. And what is being highlighted here is a model of the Bethesda pool in Jerusalem in the first century. And there's some things around it that will help you to place its location. Directly behind it, in the picture or above it, is the Antonia Fortress. Now, this Antonia Fortress was essentially the headquarters and barracks of the Roman soldiers in Jerusalem. So this was the center where all of the Roman soldiers were located and were sent out from and so on. To the left, you see the North Temple Wall. So this section was out beyond the temple. It wasn't in the temple area. It was out beyond the temple. And this area that's full of Roman soldiers, full of the headquarters of the Roman army, this is not really a place that is under the control of the Jewish authorities. This is under the control of the Romans, and this is essentially a Gentile precinct. And even looking at these structures at the Pool of Bethesda, you can see that this has a Greek architecture. Very clear. So I think looking at these details, this pool is probably different than people have imagined in the past. Some people have thought this pool must be like some kind of a mikveh or something like that, like a Jewish mikveh. But what we're looking at is actually something that's not really even Jewish. This is actually something that is more pertinent to the Romans and the Greeks. We have a quote regarding this area. It says, the Mishnah implies that at least one of these new pools was sacred to Fortuna, the goddess of fortune, rather than Asclepius, the god of healing. In the mid-1st century CE, Herod Agrippa expanded the city walls, bringing the Asclepion, that's a hard word to say, Asclepion, into the city. When Hadrian rebuilt Jerusalem as Aelia Capitolina, he placed a roadway along the dam and expanded the Asclepion into a large temple to Asclepius and Serapis. Here are Asclepius and Serapis. This area was a pagan healing facility. And it was dedicated to Asclepius and Serapis, who were false gods having to do with healing. Asclepius was considered an angel of mercy. So you see him there with his wings. And does that sign look at all familiar to you? That medical symbol? It's interesting that the medical industry is carrying on the tradition of the worship of Asclepius. And you see it in this symbol. And you see it all the time everywhere having to do with medical things, right? Pharmacies have this. You see this on the side of ambulances. You see this in hospitals. Everywhere you go, they use this sign. And this, of course, is a pagan sign. So what we're talking about with this pool is a facility that is a part of a pagan complex right outside of the wall of the temple to Yahweh. Now you might wonder, how could that be? And the reason it could be is because Judea was a Roman province. And there were soldiers there who worshiped these false deities. And there were many people from various professions that did business there in Jerusalem and in that whole area. And so they needed worship facilities for their false gods. They needed healing facilities and other things connected with their false gods. And so those were put right under the protection of Rome, right under their oversight there at the Antonia fortress. But I think what's most interesting about it is that there were a great many Hellenized Jews, people who were Jews that lived there, but who actually had acclimated themselves a great deal to the Greek culture. And so many of those people use these facilities. It says in John 5, 2 through 4, about all these sick people that were there. They were waiting for the moving of the water, for an angel went down at certain times into the pool and stirred up the water. Whoever stepped in first after the stirring of the water was made whole of whatever disease he had. Is the picture coming together of who the angel is that stirred up the water? You know, a lot of times we hear the word angel and we think about Yahweh's angels, right? But those are not the only messengers. As we know, angel means messenger. And as the scripture tells us, Satan masquerades as an angel of light. And back then, he came to people under the name of Asclepius. I think this helps to explain all of these snakes, doesn't it? Well, what about these signs? What about these healings? What was going on here? There'd be a stirring of the water. The first person that got in was healed. At least it seems that way. And then others were left behind. Does that really sound to you like the way that Yahweh does things? A certain man was there who had been sick for 38 years. When Yeshua saw him lying there and knew that he had been sick for a long time, he asked him, "Do you want to be made well?" I think that's a great question. Do you want to be made well? You know, it's interesting. Most of us would just assume he wanted to be well, right? Yeshua obviously knew not everybody actually wants to be well. Maybe this is a good place to hang out where people will feel sorry for you and give you money. So Yeshua wasn't even going to try until he knew that the man actually wanted to be well. The sick man answered him, "Sir, I have no one to put me into the pool when the water is stirred up, but while I'm coming, another steps down before me." So notice how this works. Those who are most in need can never get in the pool. There's always somebody who's quicker and stronger that gets into the pool first. You know what this sounds like to me? A scam. I've seen this work. I used to work somewhere at a civic center, and I was part of the maintenance crew. In fact, I was actually the boss. And so I had access to all areas because I had to maintain all areas. We had a famous faith healer come in to that facility and put on his show. What I saw behind the stage, in the areas in the back of the whole place, was people coming in who could walk perfectly fine, perfectly healthy, getting into the staging area, getting in their wheelchairs, putting on their various paraphernalia, and making themselves look very pathetic. And then they were wheeled out around or walked out around or with their canes or whatever, and certainly creating a lot of sympathy as they went out and seemed to be part of the crowd coming in. And then the ushers were there and they would see them and they'd say, "Oh, you so need healing today. We have reserved a special place for folks like you right up here at the front. You come on up here and you can be healed." So these people who go up there, they're believing that this guy can heal them. So the time comes, and the man starts healing people. And he healed everybody that came to him. Only he had it set up so that all the people that came to him were the people who were the setup. After he did this, he had it all worked out what to say to people. If you weren't healed tonight, don't worry, just go home and pray. You'll be healed if you support this ministry of healing. And then he would set out some huge figure that people needed to put in, and then he sent out the ushers with these things, those big buckets. He brought in a huge amount of money. And he went from city to city doing this. Got very wealthy, very rich. All off of lying signs and wonders. And you know those people that were there? I couldn't even tell them what happened. They wouldn't even believe me. Their hope was so great in getting healed that they wouldn't even believe it when I told them what happened. I believe that's what happened here at this pool. I think this was a religious scam, just like what I just told you. I think they had it set up this way that the water would stir and one person could get in. And they had somebody set up there who was near the place where the water would stir, who was perfectly able to get in before everybody else. And that kept everybody else who needed to be healed hanging on, and therefore kept all their family hanging on and kept greasing the wheels. So, you know, if you look at it this way, this really is carrying on that theme about the lying signs, isn't it? About people following after signs. And what's wrong with that? Here's this poor guy, what was it, 28 years? Whatever number it was really long. Would people really hang on that long? He saw no other hope. And we might wonder about him. What is he doing there? Why is he in this pagan healing facility? I assume he was a Jew. What about us? Do we go to healing facilities that employ pagan methods? You know, such facilities exist. Some kinds of alternate medicine are really based in false religion and paganism. Even conventional medicine. The word pharmacy comes from the Greek word pharmakia, which means spiritism. Very often people do end up abusing pharmaceutical drugs. Many times some of these drugs are associated with what they call hallucinations. And some very bad things happen. You know, when people are sick and have a problem, even believers, unfortunately, sometimes we might turn to the wrong place. I think it is interesting that at this time, Yeshua did not scold this man for being there. That doesn't mean it was okay. It just means that Yeshua saw the bigger need. Yeshua said to him, "Arise, take up your mat, and walk." Where's the big show? Where's the big show? The real deal doesn't have a big show. It doesn't need a big show, so people miss it. It says, immediately the man was made well and took up his mat and walked. Now it was the Sabbath on that day. So it's the Sabbath, and are we saying that Yeshua actually went into this unholy pagan place on the Sabbath? I think that's what we're saying, isn't it? Yeshua came to save the afflicted and the lost, and that place was where at least one of them could be found on that Sabbath. So he went in there and he fished out that person. I find it interesting that he didn't try to enlighten them about what a fool they'd been for so many years and where they were and why that was wrong. He just knew that if that person was healed, they wouldn't go back there anymore. And that person didn't go back there anymore. Further on, it says, afterward, Yeshua found him in the temple. So he's no longer in the facility of Asclepius. He's now in the temple of Yahweh. He was touched by the Son of God, and that changed his life. Yeshua said, behold, you are made well. Sin no more so that nothing worse happens to you. What sin is he talking about? I'm thinking he's talking about the sin of allowing himself to be involved in that paganism. That's what I'm thinking. And can sin cause something worse to happen to you? Well, if Yeshua said it, that must be possible, right? Well, then we have him walking around with his mat on the Sabbath. And of course, this part of the story we all know pretty well. They saw him, the Judeans saw him, saying, it is the Sabbath. It is not legal for you to carry that mat. And of course, he simply blamed Yeshua, not even knowing who he was. I think that's interesting. You know, that is so different, by the way, from these fake faith healers. Because when they put on their show, they want everybody to know who they are. Yeshua didn't even mention his own name to the man. For this cause, the Judeans persecuted Yeshua and sought to kill him because he did these things on the Sabbath. Now, I find it very interesting that what they were mad about is this legalistic trivia. While right across the wall, they have this huge pagan facility that their people are going to, apparently on the Sabbath, and they don't have anything to say about that. Do you know why? They don't want to make the Romans mad. So they exert the power over the people by pushing all of this minutia, all these little laws and stuff, while at the same time they're letting all of this paganism go on unchallenged. Here, Yeshua has done a sign that is a real biblical sign, and the people who should see it and respond to it and know it don't even recognize it for what it is, while they are tolerating these lying signs and wonders from paganism right behind the temple of Yahweh. If you were Yahweh, what would you think about that temple and that system? Would you think maybe it needed to be torn down? So, I think this is an amazing story. I believe that the reason that John doesn't actually mention Asclepius and all of that is he's not writing to stir up trouble with the Gentiles. And he doesn't have to mention it because his Jewish audience already knows about it. They know exactly what he's talking about. They know exactly the pool he's talking about. And no doubt some of them had been there. Signs and symbols. You know, this medical symbol Isn't that a sign? I'm thinking we have a lot of these pagan signs in our culture. Have you ever noticed that? In Washington, D.C., on lots of the monuments and things in Washington, D.C., we have all of these pagan gods and pagan signs. In the Capitol, if you look up into the rotunda, you see these clouds painted up there, and all the false gods looking down over the clouds, and George Washington ascending up into the pagan heaven. These signs mean something. They tell you something. What they tell me is, don't be part of the world. It's everywhere. It is a part of our culture. When I say our culture, the modern culture, today, it's all around us, and we see it so often that sometimes we don't really even realize what we're seeing. You know, it just doesn't click with us. But it helps if we open our eyes and realize that our situation is not much different from that man who was seeking healing, looking for a sign every day, looking for a wonder to happen for him. Believers are sometimes like this. You know, sometimes we think of Yahweh as some kind of a magic worker. And we think that somehow he's just going to do this amazing miracle, and that's really the answer. Well, sometimes it is the answer, and sometimes he does do miracles. But most of the time, it is a partnership between us and him. What we do matters, the choices we make matter. Walking in his ways matter, the truth matters. Most of the time, that's how things work with him, not by some kind of a sign or some kind of a miracle. So the end result is what we really need to do, is what Yeshua was encouraging that man to do, to look to him as the source of our healing and the source of everything that we need, to give up on the flash, the big show, and get down to what is real. Controversial healings.
Was this video informative? Click the like button below to help spread the word to others. Feel free to leave a comment and share your thoughts. Don't forget to subscribe and ring the bell so you won't miss out on more amazing content from Eliyahu ben David. For whatever things were written before were written for our learning, that we, through the patience and comfort of the Scriptures, might have hope. You know, the apostles, they were Torah scholars. This is why I'm doing Tsiyon Academy. The lessons include 2-hour audio programs and quiz modules. All the lessons in the Torah can be applied to us today. Not to mention, they open up the renewed covenant scriptures in a whole new level, much like the apostles had understanding of the Torah. Plus, I can do the courses in my own time, at my own pace, with no prerequisites, and at a very low cost. I can do them here. Or here.
Tsiyon Academy students are provided with study materials, the Tsiyon Messianic Scriptures, in-depth verse-by-verse programs, and quizzes with your final grade and a certificate at the end of the course. Tsiyon Academy also offers assignments for students who would like to opt in to take part in the Tsiyon Tabernacle live Shabbat meetings. Become immersed in the Torah. Find out how you can become a Tsiyon Academy student at tsiyon.org.